Good morning, everyone. Today I would like to tell you something a bit different, and I'd like to tell you about how long I've been coming to Thailand and basically about the last 30 years that I had been either living or frequently visiting Thailand. And I'm going to sit down at a cafe. It'll be much easier to talk, so let's find a cafe, sit down, and do this thing. Okay, guys, I found me a really nice cafe, quite deserted at the moment, which is what I wanted, so I don't get disturbed too much. And I'd like to tell you my story of living in Thailand for 30 years. So let me start saying that I never really planned to visit Thailand. I didn't know anything about Thailand. The only thing I knew is that it was located in Southeast Asia. I knew the location and I knew the name, and that's about it. And fate would have it that I was teaching in Japan, and was probably 1987. And a friend of mine that I had met in California, a guy named Quinn, was from Singapore, and he had invited me to visit Singapore since I was in Japan. So I thought it'd be a good idea, so I bought me a ticket from Tokyo to Singapore via Bangkok. And so I thought that since I'm already passing through Bangkok, I'd like to take a look at the city at the very least. I've always been very curious, and so I decided to postpone the second leg of my trip and give it one day extra so I would have a chance to go and take a look at Bangkok. And this had proved to be a turning point in my life. And so I I asked a guy at the airport whether he knows some good place to stay, because I wanted to check out Bangkok as much as possible in such a short period of time. I basically had one day to kill in Bangkok, and so this guy at the airport, a Norwegian guy, forgot his name, and he says that he's going to stay at a hotel in a convenient location, and if I want to tag along, we can split a taxi. And I obliged, and off we went. And so the hotel looked okay. I booked a room, and it was already afternoon, so I took a shower, I changed my clothes, and off I went. And this happened to be not far from the area called Patpong, and a wild entertainment area. And I was young, I was full of hormones, full of passion for life, and I said, okay, very well, let's go check out some of these places. And the music was loud, and so I poked my head into one bar, and I saw a whole number of beautiful young women, and I decided to pop in. So I had a beer, and some girls were dancing, and needless to say, they were very pretty and youthful, and I ended up talking to one of them who was friendly, and her English wasn't perfect, but she was friendly, more than willing to keep me company. And as I got drunk, and as you could imagine, I ended up spending the night with her. And in the morning, she said if I want to, she can show me around Bangkok. And so I said, why not? I had a whole day to kill, and so we set out, and she took me to various parts of Bangkok. She took me on a boat ride along the Chao Phraya River, and she was just being very nice and well-mannered and friendly, and as most people in Thailand are, and I was just absolutely blown away by her mannerism, how good-looking she was, and the beautiful scenery of Bangkok. The lazy river and the little houses and temples along the way, and then we went to a restaurant and had a local dish, very cheap. I remember just a few baht, and it was chicken and rice, typical Thai style, a kind of smallish restaurant. It was delicious, and I was absolutely taken in by the vibes of this city and by the people and the temples and everything, and I just felt like I really wanted to be there longer than just one night. And even though I had a booking, but I said to myself, when I parted ways with this wonderful lady, I couldn't sleep that night, and I just said to myself, well, this place is something else. It's got amazing vibes, it has nightlife, it's got fantastic scenery, relaxed and friendly people, and I just couldn't sleep. And that night I had decided that I'm just not going to go to Singapore at all. I'll cancel the ticket, and I'll try to spend the rest of the holiday in Thailand. And that's exactly what I did the next morning. And this is how my story in Thailand begins. I arrived at the Don Muang airport back in the day, and the funny thing is that the airport itself had not really changed that much. Yes, there's been upgraded, there's some modernity in, but the building itself and the layout is pretty much the way it was 36 years ago, and I just loved the idea of it. And so I decided, I went to the first travel agent in the morning. I tried to get a refund for the second leg of my trip. They wouldn't give me one, and I said I just could not care less, never mind then. And and I decided to stay. And so I heard from other expats that there was a town called Pattaya, a beach resort, and it was fun and everything. So I said to myself, okay, this is it, let's do it. I'm an adventurous person. I'm always up for a new adventure and some fun. And I said to myself, great, let's do this thing. And off I went to Pattaya. And so going to Pattaya was quite another adventure altogether. And I arrived in Pattaya, took a bike taxi guy, showed me the Soi 8, he said it was a good place to stay. And of course it looked great to me. There was plenty of bars and hotels. It was probably around 1 or 2 p.m. when I arrived in Pattaya, and I only had a light backpack to travel with, so it was easy to walk. And as I was walking around along Soi 8, I was looking for a suitable place to stay. And needless to say, many of the girls were catcalling me to, hey, handsome man, come on in, have a beer, have a drink. So, but I said to myself, no, first I just must find a hotel. And so I found this place. It was called the Sunshine Hotel, and you can see this in the pictures that are upcoming. And that was the very first hotel that I had stayed at in Pattaya. And once I was in a hotel, I took a quick swim in its pool, changed my clothes, took a short nap, and I hit the bars, and just like every tourist would. And I didn't need to walk far. The bars were all over the place, all along the street, and by the time I went out, it was like 5 p.m. or maybe even less, 4 p.m. The bars were going, the music was fairly loud, and the atmosphere was very cheerful. And so I ended up chatting to a girl called Lek, and her English wasn't that great, but she was able to talk enough and have fun with me. So we talked about her life, her family, and Pattaya, and had a few drinks, and she was very nice to be with. So again, I ended up staying with this girl for quite some time, and I explored Pattaya with her. And in the photo, you can see me standing with Lek in front of the Sunshine Hotel circa 1987. And then you can see me in the other photo standing there alone in 2024. So, yeah, it was way better back in the old days, and there's nothing I can't go back in time, unfortunately, but I was absolutely I fell in love with Thailand basically, and not just because of the girls. It was just the mannerism of the people, the weather, the architecture, the laid back atmosphere, and the vibrant nightlife certainly made it nicer. Excellent food and temples and everything. So, and then once I parted ways with Lek, I realized I needed a motorbike, but I didn't know how to ride one. So I went to a local guy who had a rental shop, and he showed me how it's done. And basically, the manual motorbikes, which most of them were back then, were the clutch and changing gears was no different than on a car. So I picked it up very quickly. And once I had a motorbike, it was a Honda Cub 90cc bike, and I learned how to ride it, and it didn't take me long, and pretty soon I was riding like a local, and I ended up running into some other beautiful women that I met, and they kept me company. One of them really enjoyed riding bikes, so I rented a bigger bike once I got a hang of riding the small ones, and then I explored Pattaya and the surrounding areas. I went to the elephant sanctuary, and boy, that was a bit scary, but the locals were not scared of the elephant. These huge elephants. I was absolutely frozen, and it was quite an experience. And eventually, I had to go back to Japan and make some more money. And as soon as I had the money, I was back in Thailand. And this time, I had to part ways with the girl that had spent some time with me, and unfortunately, by the time I came back there, she was nowhere to be found. And so I rented a big Yamaha 1000cc bike, and as I was young and full of adrenaline, the bike was perfect. It was extremely fast and accelerating like no car could beat me at the time, and I was young and stupid, and I pushed it really hard, and eventually, in order to avoid a collision on the Chonburi Expressway, I was forced to take a dive in the ditch, but because there was long grass, nothing serious happened to me, just scratches and bruises, and the bike as well, just a few scratches. Nothing happened due to the big, soft, long grass, and it was a miracle. And I learned my lesson, and then I only needed a few bandages, and when another girl in a bar saw this, she was sympathetic, and she volunteered to stay with me for free until I recover, and so she did. And you can see in the photos the bike and my friend, and it was just an amazing experience. And the longer I stayed in Thailand, the more I liked it. But as always, the money eventually ran out, and I was forced to leave again. And so I ended up going to make some more money, but I was determined to come back again as soon as I could. And surely I did. Well, once I saved a decent chunk of money, it was time to come back to Thailand, and this time I decided to go and check out Phuket. Everyone talked about it, and once I saw Phuket, I rented a Honda Steed cruiser bike, and I just absolutely loved the scenery and cruised around town. I visited the Phuket town, which was quite an experience. And back in the day, the beaches were not as crowded as, not even close. In fact, I ended up renting a room near Kata Beach, and the beach was really clean and it was mostly deserted. There was just a handful of people back then, and I only paid like $110 for a whole month in a small room, but it had fan and and I kept riding around the island and met a very nice girl who then cruised around with me and showed me a lot of places. And whenever I went to the beach, I was often the only one or just one of a couple of people. And you can see in the photos how deserted the Kata Beach was and how clean it was. And that was Thailand before mass tourism, and there were tourists for sure, but there were nowhere near, there were no crowds, there were no tour buses coming in, and so it was, the island was pristine. There were buffaloes freely walking around. There were, the whole area behind Patong Beach was deserted, and you could see buffaloes bathing in puddles of mud, and so it was pure joy. Phuket back then was much more natural than it is today, and prices were lower, hotels were far fewer, and the nightlife was also nice, but much smaller than Bangkok or Pattaya. But to me, it didn't matter. I didn't come there for the bars alone, and so I ended up meeting some nice girls, and as most guys did, and it just made life absolutely wonderful. But then my money ran out, and I was forced to go to make some more money. And when I came back, I brought a couple of friends with me. They were fascinated by my stories from Thailand, and so we all three came. My friend Dave and my friend Grant, they loved it. And soon enough, they found themselves girls. They learned how to ride bikes really quickly. And I couldn't find Onjira, the girl that I had spent time before with, but I ended up dating a girl that I had only met as a friend named Lada. And Lada had a friend, and Grant fell in love with her very quickly, which was easy to do. And then we all three were hitting the beaches, hitting the restaurants, and the guys absolutely loved it. And unfortunately, their finances also ran out quickly, and so they had to leave, and I stayed on longer, and Lada volunteered to stay with me even if I gave her no money. So of course I gave her some money, because that was just common sense, and she wasn't asking for it. They were so polite back in the day, but of course they expected something, and so it was an amazing. I almost spent a whole year with Lada. You can see her in the pictures that will follow. And yeah, so eventually, we had wonderful times together in Phuket, but slowly my money was giving out, and I realized that I would eventually have to go back to teaching. And before I left, Lada suggested that she was expecting some sort of a commitment from me, maybe even marriage, and this was very difficult for me to tell her that I just wasn't ready for it. And she spent all this time with me, and I felt so bad that I explained to her that as much as I'd like to, I simply don't have the money to carry on and as a couple. she was very sad, and I realized I had to return back to work, and from the money I still had left, I gave her almost half of it, and so we parted on good terms. She understood the problem, and so we parted ways. But this was an eye-opener for me. I had decided at that point that unless I was ready to have a serious long-term relationship with a girl, unless I was ready for that, then I would rather not date seriously any girl any longer, because I felt so guilty about Lada.